back to the show. I'm your host, Charles. Today, I'd like to talk about the first year of recovery. Now, this is called early recovery oftentimes, but the reason I want to talk about it is that I saw a statistic that around 70% of people will relapse within that first year. Think about that for a second. It means if you're in a treatment center with 10 people, 7 of them are going to relapse within the first year. That tells you something's amiss with our system, right? Something needs to be fixed, changed, added, whatever, right? Um, my experience is, I went to a treatment center, and the most important part for me, I'm just going to start at when I walk through the doors, right? I was terrified, absolutely terrified. Never been in treatment before, had no idea what to expect. I had an image in my mind of like a lockdown, like psych ward and padded walls and oh my God, it's going to be terrible and all this stuff. But it wasn't the case. It was actually a really positive experience. I remember when I was going through the intake process, when I was there with the nurse, I was really nervous, and I think she could tell because she started to share some of her own stories of how she was able to obtain recovery from her crack addiction, right? And at that moment, I knew I was with people who cared. I was with people who wanted to help, who had been through it, and who had found another way to live, you know? Um, so it was really important for me to get into that headspace. And, if anyone watching this is considering going to treatment or something like that, I have some advice. The first thing is find the right kind of treatment for you. All right. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, for me, I had some mental health stuff going on along with my addiction. So I found a dual diagnosis treatment center. So that's a treatment center where, they will work on the mental health and addiction, you know, kind of at the same time, right? You have other places that are mental health only, right? You have other places that are addiction only, and then you have all kinds of different versions of addiction treatment, right? You have trauma informed treatment, you have wilderness therapy, you have places that do art therapy, you have there's a lot of different elements to it. So if you're considering going into treatment, I would start by calling some of these different places, some of these different treatment centers around town, and just kind of ask them, hey, what do you guys treat? I have this going on and that, and what do you guys do? Because it's not just go to a treatment center for 30, 60, 90 days, whatever it is, and then just get back to life, right? I think that's why people are relapsing so much in that first year. So I'm just going to start with the first piece of that equation, which is finding the right treatment center. So I think once you have found a treatment center that you know you feel will be a good fit, go tour. Go visit that place in person. Go walk around, see the people, talk to the doctors, all that stuff. Get a feel for it, because you also want some place that you're going to be comfortable. You're going to want some place where you feel like you can trust and open up and all that stuff, which, by the way, anything that you speak about in treatment, it's covered under HIPAA, right? Now, the only way that that can be circumvented is if somebody has an ROI written, right? A release of information. So when you're doing your intake, when they're asking you about, hey, who would you like us to release this information to, right? That would be your progress through treatment. That would be your goals, your all that stuff, right? Um, so consider who you want to be a part of that and fill those out, right? For me, I made all of my family members get full access, because I wanted to stop hiding. I had a double life thing going on for a very long time, and everybody was surprised outside of my brother, right? But everybody else was surprised. They didn't, really know any of that stuff was going on. I'd hid it for a long time, you know, and I felt that by opening up those channels of communication and allowing them in, I could start to rebuild some trust, you know, and they ended up being really great supports as well, So the only way that that any support person can be helpful is if we open up and talk to them, and allow them to be a part of it. Right. And I think that I think finding a program, if you have a lot of family stuff, I think finding a program that has a family program can be helpful as well. I know, like Cedar, for example, they used to have one back in the day. I'm not sure if they do still. I think they do, but essentially, it's time for the parents to come in, or the spouses or whoever, and learn about addiction, and learn what it takes to get and stay in recovery. And yeah, like we learned about family meetings, where you guys all sit down like once a week, for example, and that's kind of the time when the loved ones can ask about the recovery and the treatment. How's everything going? What goals have you made? What things are you working on? Like whatever's on their mind. But that's also a time when the family, we can also kind of guide their support a little bit, right? So you know maybe if something happened the other day where they were trying to support, but maybe they were a little heavy handed about it or whatever, instead of just grinding our teeth and pushing it down and ignoring it, right? Instead of doing that, that's the time when we can say, hey, you know what, the other day when you wanted me to quit smoking, and you hit me over the head with a brick, or whatever. I didn't like that. It wasn't helpful. I smoked anyway. Like it's that's the time when we can bring up things like that and have a safe place to communicate that. Because the other thing to keep in mind too is that the family is going through this for the first time typically as well, right? Or, if it's multiple times, right? Maybe there are certain elements that were helpful before that are maybe not as helpful now. So it's good to address those things and open up and be transparent and allow new things to come in, allow that support to come in and help. And that's definitely an important part for sure. So I also want to talk about the state of mind when we go into a treatment center, because I think that that's more important even than the type of treatment center you go to, right? So imagine for a moment a person who does not want to go to treatment. They don't think they have a problem, none of that stuff, right? You could send them to the greatest treatment center on earth with the most world renowned doctors and this and that and blah, blah, blah. If they don't want to be there, and if they're not open to it, if they're not open minded and willing to try or any of that, there's no point going to that particular treatment center, in my opinion. Right now, that's not to say that maybe their minds can be changed when they're there, as some type of intervention, or that kind of stuff can be helpful. But just in terms of a person going into a treatment center, the more open-minded and willing to try whatever they suggest, the better, right? And the reason I say that is that you know nobody can think their way out of addiction, right? No, we can't do this on our own. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. We need people around us. We need tools. We need to get stuff off our chests. We need to, learn how to communicate better. We need to learn how to, find new ways of dealing with old problems, all that stuff, and that takes treatment, in my opinion. That takes getting into a program and really being open minded and willing to try whatever they have to suggest. Because think about it for a second, right? If I go into a treatment center saying, I know exactly who I am, that'll work, that won't work, and that will work, right? What's the point of going to the treatment center? If I already know all that stuff, what's the point, right? But if I go in there and say, hey, you know what? I'm lost. I tried it my way and that didn't go so well, right? So I'm going to try whatever you guys have to share. Because think about it, worst case scenario, a particular suggestion doesn't work. Who cares? Move on to the next one, right? Maybe the next one will work. But the upside is so much better, right? Because you could find that missing puzzle piece, you know, and that could allow you to get into long term recovery, you know, because a lot of times it's a cycle, is what I've noticed. You know, it's a cycle of, oh, I fight with my partner and then this and that. And then my mental health goes in the toilet and then I run out of meds and now I'm back. And here we go round and round and round and round. Right. So until we find a way to break that cycle and learn some new stuff, try some new things, we're just going to get the same thing. It's like the definition of insanity, you know? So I think being in the right place for that mentally, right? Being ready for that, I think is important as well. And being invested, you know, knowing that it's for you, right? It doesn't matter if every external force on earth is pushing down on you, telling you to get clean, right? I've known people that still go back, right? They still go back. Some of them never returned. You know, they passed away. So it's really really important to take it seriously and realize that, you know, with a little change in perspective, a little more open-mindedness, a little more willingness, we can genuinely change this whole equation for ourselves. So yeah, that's definitely an important part. And you know, I think the other largest contributor to that 70% relapse rate is the aftercare, right? I think that, you know, if somebody goes to treatment for a certain amount of time, personally, I think the longer the better, right? With steps down in care. So, for example, you go from super controlled environment, a treatment center, right, where there's no drugs, there's no nothing, and it's easy to stay clean in a place like that, right? But if you all of a sudden drop right down to, oh, I'm back by myself in my same apartment with my same triggers and my same cycles and my same everything, now I've just removed my way of coping with all that, but I haven't really worked on the situations themselves that contribute to why I use, right? So I think that having, you know, a longer program with steps down in care can be successful, you know. So you have inpatient for, you know, 30, 60, 90 days, whatever it is. And then there's sober living that you can do after that. You know, there's, you add in therapy, you know, you get a coach, you know, you do all that kind of stuff, you know. And I think that having more of that smooth kind of transition from step to step can definitely be helpful. And, you know, the other thing, don't test yourself. You know, I remember I heard a story about, um, you know, there was some person had a bag of dope in their nightstand or something, right? And they were like, every morning I wake up and I prove to myself I'm stronger than that dope. And I remember thinking to myself, like, okay, well that's good, you know, strength is good, but what about the day when you're not? It's right there. It's way too easy to relapse. You know, the way I look at relapse is it's a plan, right? It's a whole series of steps in a plan. So if the final step of actually obtaining your substance, if it's that easy, I think that's a terrible idea, personally. You know, but again, like everybody recovers in different ways and all that stuff. But man, make it as hard as possible to relapse. You know, we don't have to test ourselves like that, in my opinion. Like, what's the upside? We get a little stronger, have a little more confidence, perhaps, right? But the downside is so much greater. You know, so I mean, I say make it as hard as possible so that if we get to that moment, you know, where we're considering a relapse or something, It's going to be way harder because we've deleted everybody's phone numbers, right? We don't hang out with those people anymore, right? We certainly don't have substances on us, right? All that stuff. So that step in the plan is more difficult, you know. Um and I think the other part of the 70% relapse rate also is just, people being willing to do what's needed, cuz I let go of 90% of my friends, and some of them have come back into my life over the years, right? They're doing better. We can hang out and whatnot now, but most of them haven't, and that is most definitely me being overly cautious, but with good reason. So, I don't just go to an old friend's house and go hang out for a party and just kind of hope it goes well, right? Like that's no, we don't do that. So a more appropriate way to handle a situation like that is, you can talk to the friend, you can present your recovery to them, and if you get, oh man, that's awesome, I'm so proud of you, like what can I do to help, can we go get coffee, like, if you get a response like that, cool, it's a good friend, but I've gotten responses in the past where it's like, oh, okay, you don't do drugs anymore, so want to go to the bar then, like what are we doing? It's like, no, you missed the point. No, I do not want to go to the bar. So kind of setting up some of those boundaries, especially with people who knew the old you, can be really, really important. You know, like before you don't go to just a random party with a bunch of old friends who knew you as the using you, right? That's dangerous. It's very dangerous. But you can instead contact that friend and say, hey, man, I want to hang out. Let's go to the driving range. Let's go hit some golf balls, right? Let's go get some coffee. Let's go whatever, right? Something fun. And if they're a true friend, they'll realize that that's a struggle to go to a party like that. And it's not a very comfortable environment for us sometimes, right? So, definitely kind of beefing that up, I think can be helpful as well. But um, yeah, and it's, I think holding stuff in is another huge contributor to that 70% relapse rate. I've heard people talk about they don't want to be a burden on other people. Oh, I don't want to bring people down. I don't want to, put my problems on somebody else and all that kind of stuff, right? But when we hold things in and just push them down, they don't go away. They just sit there and fester and grow and start doing push-ups, right? It's just how it is. And eventually, one way or another, they're going to come up, and usually it's in a pretty unpleasant way, right? We explode emotionally, right? We get super angry, whatever it is, So it's okay to not be okay, right? Like we don't have to hide from our support people that we're struggling. That is exactly what they're there for. It's 100% what they're there for, is to help, whether it's to help find, whatever other aftercare we might need, right? Whether it's just to talk about it, whatever. But that's also a moment to say to your support people, like, hey, I want to be open with you. I want to be transparent. I want to be rigorously honest about how things are going and how this journey is for me. Now, I need you to know, support people, that sometimes I might say some stuff that's triggering to you, right? Like, hey, I'm struggling. I'm struggling, right? Like a parent, for example, could freak out and go, oh my God, they're struggling. Holy shit, what do we do? Da, 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 da. Right? Now, it's important to have those boundaries set up, right? And to have that communication of, hey, I'm struggling. Here's what I think I need, right? Or, hey, I've been reading about this. I'd like to try this. Like, whatever it is, right? But don't hold stuff in. Don't hold stuff in. You can't, you can't suffer in silence and expect people to know that you're not okay, right? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Like there might be that one person on planet Earth who knows you better than you know yourself, who can say, "Oh, I noticed a little frown in the eye thing. Are you okay? Like, I noticed that. That's you don't do that usually. Are you doing okay?" But we can't expect random support people to see those things and equate that to, "Oh, maybe they're not okay. I should probably ask them." We have to take charge of our recovery. We have to be vocal about what we need. We have to be vocal about the things that are dangerous, that we don't want to be around, right? Like if our entire friend group is going to go to a party and we are super uncomfortable, say, "No, I'm sorry, dude. I'm trying to stay clean. I don't feel comfortable at a random house party with people I've used with in the past. I'm not going to go. Sorry. If you want to hang out, we'll go do something else." Nothing wrong with that. you know can still have friends, can still go hang out and do lots of fun stuff, but it's about respecting ourselves enough to not just throw ourselves into dangerous situations like we did in our active addiction, right? It's all about changing our approach. It's all about growing. It's about seeing these past situations and learning from them and saying, "Oh yeah, every time I'm around that friend group, I use every single time." And we have to be honest with ourselves. We can't say, "Oh, well, I'll probably just magically be clean this time." Right? No, we need to be honest with ourselves. That's not the case, right? So, um, it's just important to realize that that first year is tough. The first year is tough. You know, it takes so much change on our part that we have to be ready for it. And we have to be willing to do whatever it takes to stay clean, right? Like if you used to, walk through a snowstorm to go pick up, you got to walk through a snowstorm to go to a meeting if you don't have a car, right? Like you have to have that same kind of commitment to it, because man, that first year, I felt like everything was turned up to 11 when I got out of treatment, and everything was overwhelming and this and that. And, it was very, very fortunate for me that I got into as many meetings as I could and lots of therapy as quick as I got out. As soon as I got out, I got into all that stuff because it allowed me to process some of the things that I was feeling in this very jarring, you know, um, just early period of recovery. So um, if you have any questions or comments or anything, leave them down in the comment section. And I'd love to dive into this topic further. So send me some questions. I'll have the email down below because I think this is a really important topic for us to explore further, because there's a lot of people who are on the fence of, getting into recovery or going to treatment or any of that stuff. And I think it's good to know what you're getting into before you start so that you're ready for it, as ready as you can be at least, right? Because it's not easy by any means. Recovery is not easy, right? But it's the most lasting positive thing I've ever had in my life. I've gained my life back, right? I don't sit here and fantasize about using anymore. I don't relapse. I've never relapsed, right? I don't go and put myself in dangerous situations. I don't speak to myself poorly, right? Like my inner critic, right? None of that stuff. Been able to start fresh with genuinely a brand new life, right? But it took all that work in the beginning. It takes ongoing work, right? I still have a person that I talk to, you know, and that's just to process ongoing things that come up because life has stuff like that. It's just how it is, right? Just because we get clean doesn't mean the problems stop, but we figure out how to handle them differently, right? We figure out how to constructively rebuild our lives. So I think this is a great place to start. And if you're on the fence, just try it. Just try it. Try everything that they suggest. Some things will fit, others won't. That's by design. They have so many people from so many different walks of life coming through those doors of the treatment center that they have to do a shotgun approach, right? But once you find the parts that you relate to, you find the parts that are helpful for you, dive into those, dive further, ask them more about it, doing aftercare around, relationships or mental health or whatever it is for you that you gravitate towards. So um, we'll get through this together, and we'll definitely address any questions that are sent in, and we'll keep on keeping on. So thanks for tuning in. See you next time.